Today I will be giving my informative speech.
I'm Alec.
Brandon.
Colin.
Hazen.
Nick.
I'm Abby.
Okay, today I will be giving my informative speech on mass incarceration. In the 1980s, the number of state and federal prison inmates rose to 270,000. Since then, it has risen over 2 million, which is a 500% increase. This growth has resulted in increasingly expensive facilities. So by examining policy and social influences of the 80s, 90s, and now, I hope to present to you why mass incarceration is such an issue in our country. First, we'll look at the 1980s. This is the time when Nixon was leaving the White House and Reagan was taking over. President Reagan was taking over. Nixon called for law and order and declared war on drugs. It wasn't until President Reagan came into office that changes in policy began to increase, though. One of these policies was the Sentencing Reform Act of 1984. This act abolished a federal parole system. There was also the act in 1986, which was the Anti-Drug Abuse Act. This established mandatory minimums, which also gave zero judicial discretion. The Criminal Justice Policy Foundation, which is the oldest drug policy reform organization in the U.S., said, as a result, each year, tens of thousands of low-level state and federal defendants face harsh punishments that are often denounced by judges forced to impose at times of sentencing. So since we've learned about some policies in the 1980s, we can also address some social atmosphere that were going on in the 1980s. In the journal, Redesigning Racial Caste in America via Mass Incarceration, the Vice President of Internal Psychohistorical Association, Gil DeGraff, stated that just as war on drugs was starting in the early 1980s, inner city communities were suffering economic collapses as urban deindustrialization eroded the labor market for unskilled young men. Simply put, the severe decline in job opportunities in low-income and middle-class neighborhoods was an incentive to sell more drugs. Since we looked at the 1980s policies and social atmosphere, we can now start by analyzing the political climate of the 1990s. In November 1993, Bill Clinton was elected president. This is during the same time when Washington became the first state to pass the Initiative 593. This initiative stated 3 strikes and you're out policy. 1 year later, President Clinton signed the Violent Crimes Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. This act increased personnel police presence by 100,000. A book written by JPI titled Incarceration Generation stated this act gave federal grants to states that proved their laws led to inmates serving at least 85% of their sentence. Additional social and political disparities also occurred in the 1990s. The American Bail Coalition formed in the early 90s, and it promoted for-profit bail bonding. This gave room for corruption by politicians and lobbyist groups during this time. Gil DeGraff stated that under the Clinton administration, a 5-year lifetime limit on welfare assistance was increased, as well as a lifetime ban on eligibility for welfare or food stamps for anyone convicted of a felony offense. This included simple possession of marijuana as well. These 2 points can help one understand the role that money and politics offhandedly played in continuing the rise of incarceration and difficulties for disadvantaged people. As we looked at the 1990s, we can now compare that time to the 2000s and now. As the prison population surpassed 1 million people, we were finally able to see some positive changes in policies. Certain states took measures to establish rehabilitative and re-entry programs, the biggest of which was made by President Bush's Second Chance Act of 2007. According to policy analyst Nathan James, the review of literature on rehab programs suggests there are enough scientifically sound evaluations to conclude these programs are effective at reducing recidivism. Though many organizations and policies were put in place to advocate for justice reform, incarceration still remains a significant problem. Most people these days do not know what the term felony disenfranchisement means. This term means losing the right to vote for those convicted. This can happen just for the conviction. This can happen just for when they are in their sentence or for the whole lifetime. In a study conducted by the Sentencing Project organization that promotes fair and effective criminal justice system, found 6.1 million Americans are unable to vote due to felony disenfranchisement policies. In conclusion, today we learned how the era of mass incarceration came to be through analyzing the 80s, 90s, and now. There are many political and atmosphere acts that changed how mass incarceration has been viewed and grown since the 80s. By informing you all on this topic, I hope to have sparked interest or at least increase awareness of sentencing policies and unjust racial practices that need reform. If you remember anything from today, let it be that 2.2 million Americans are incarcerated and it is obviously not effective in achieving public safety. Thank you.